Now, there's a huge difference between catching criminals and trying to take credit after the police already kicked the door in. And right now, Minnesota looks like somebody showed up to the crime scene with a camera crew and trying to act like they solved it. Let me show you what you watch.
Ms. Rarick, you spoke about the retaliation that many have experienced in light of trying to expose the fraud and the corruption happening in Minnesota. Can you speak more to that and what people are experiencing when they try to sound the alarm on what's happening?
Right. So that retaliation's been going on for quite some time. If you look at what Faye Bernstein said in a news report or Newsweek article back in 2019, it started for her, and she was heavily investigated. She was actually moved to a different state agency. She was, retaliated against in every kind of way you can think. What's happened now is retaliation has escalated, and now it's you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your home, we're going to track your children, we're going to make sure that you can't get a job anywhere else in state government. And for Minnesota, that means probably Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Duluth, Rochester. You can't get a job anywhere that Democrats control.
That's pretty terrifying. Do you think that's going to prevent people from continuing to speak out on the issue?
Well, we are really hoping that with all of this light on it and, telling people that this is the retaliation, that if something like that does come to fruition, right now it's threats, although some people have been fired, that they have a little bit more ability to speak up and speak to us, and that we can cover them in that way. But it's been really, really bad, and it's been bad for quite some time.
Now, y'all see that? I want to read Kash Patel's, before I do that right there, that's not a small accusation, right? That's whistleblower level, burn your career to tell the truth type talk right there. When people start saying things like you'll lose your job, your home, your future, that's not policy disagreement right there. That's pressure. And notice something. When regular people mess up, you know how it works. It's going to be immediate consequences. When people inside the system mess up, suddenly it's complicated. Yeah, it's funny how that works. However, Kash Patel posted, let me see. Come again. The FBI and DOJ with our DHS partners drafted and executed every search warrant today, but go ahead and take credit for our work while we smoke out the fraud plaguing Minnesota under your governorship. Yeah. Hopefully I read that word right. But here's where it gets wild. Because instead of addressing any of that, somebody decided that this was the perfect moment to take a victory lap.
You're going to get caught. And that's exactly what we saw today. We catch we catch criminals when state and federal agencies share information, joint investigation work, and securing justice depends on it. They didn't do anything, Ainsley. No agents, no nothing. It was the federal government. And by the way, Ainsley, they criticized them when they were on the ground in Minnesota doing this exact work.
I know. And Kash Patel, who is the FBI director, federal agent, he wrote, "Come again? This FBI and DOJ with our DHS partners drafted and executed every search warrant today. But go ahead and take credit for our work while we smoke out the fraud plaguing Minnesota under your governorship."
Yeah, 22 separate locations were raided. They're talking about hundreds, if not billions of dollars. Most of them are Somali-run businesses. Here's the governor last night.
I promised you that I would devote my energies to fighting fraud in our state's human resources program. I've said the buck stops with me. And as I know some of you will take that as an open invitation to play politics with every incident of fraud that takes place here in Minnesota, even though I have to tell you, the statistics show it's happening in red states more than here. My ask for you tonight is simple. If you're taking fraud seriously, take your responsibility seriously and pass legislation to stop it. If you talk about oversight, vote for that oversight in the bills that are working their way through the chamber. You gotta want to stop it, not just talk about it. So send them to my desk and I'll sign them into law immediately. And let's make sure these programs remain strong, accountable, and effective, because too many Minnesotans rely on them.
Like autistic kids, like starving families in need. $300 million in stolen federal nutrition funds, $9 billion in Medicaid-related schemes. That's going into the raids. Ainsley, imagine what they're going to find when they come out and get additional information.
Absolutely. And one of those places that was raided was the Learning Center. Remember that Nick
Leering.
Shirley exposed that. It was the Leering Center on the sign. So they're supposed to teach our children. Meanwhile, nobody was being taught there. They were putting cars in the parking lot, and they hadn't moved in months just to make it look like it was a legitimate business, and it was not. So I applaud our federal government for being able to investigate this and being able to find out who is stealing money. This is taxpayer money. We all work really hard, and everyone should be on board. I'm just amazed because now the governor is taking credit. But in the past, they've been just flabbergasted that the Trump administration, the FBI, would call out fraud. You know what's happening in California? They're trying to pass a bill to say that you can't expose this.
Yes,
that people like Nick Shirley can't go in and expose the fraud.
That's so true, Ainsley. And credit to J.D. Vance, the president entrusted him. He said, go out there. You better go find it. Go find the fraud all over this. Go get our money back.
In Republican and Democrat states.
Exactly. The difference is the Republican states have been willing.
You ever see somebody try to grab credit so fast, they don't realize that the receipt is still printing? That's exactly what just happened. You got federal agencies kicking in doors, writing them warrants, building the cases, and out of nowhere, yeah, we did that. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Not even a little bit. No. That's like your neighbor's house on fire. Firefighters show up, and you come outside like, good thing I handled that. Handled what? The front porch? Like, bro, what? And the crazy part is, I'm pretty sure they didn't expect pushback, but then Cashapp Patel steps in like, nah, we ain't gonna do that today. See, the problem isn't just the fraud, it's the confidence to act like nobody's paying attention anymore. And once that illusion cracks, man, now people start asking a different question. And that is, how big is this thing actually?
I believe that the Somali fraud operation in Minnesota is the single greatest theft of taxpayer dollars through welfare fraud in American history. We believe that we have only scratched the very top of the surface of how deep this goes. And you're familiar with all the scams with pretending that children have autism who are not in fact autistic, with pretending to enroll people in food programs when in fact nobody was ever enrolled, and engaging in massive fraud, lying, and theft and grift on a scale we've never seen before in American history. The total bill, the total tab for this is going to be far beyond the numbers we've already seen reported. We believe the state government is fully complicit in this scheme, and we believe that what we are going to uncover is going to shock the American people. Look, based on the records that we already have, and this is a significant undercount, by the way, 75% of the Somali population in Minnesota is on welfare. But that's likely a significant undercount of just how much of a financial burden the Somali refugee population is imposing on this country.
Yeah. Largest theft of taxpayer money? That's not a headline, man. That's a warning, because when something gets that big, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes access. That takes people looking the other way, or worse. And every time you hear we're, just scratching the surface, trust me, that's cold. It's cold for what you've seen so far. That's just the trailer. So now you've got scale, you've got federal raids, you've got whistleblowers, which brings us to the next question people are starting to ask. Who knew what and when?
This message is for Ilhan Omar, and if you're not Ilhan Omar, you can probably just keep scrolling. Girl, what are you doing? You cannot go around calling reporters stupid for asking questions about your clearly fraudulent financial disclosure when the internet is forever and there are clips like this just floating around out there.
The last time the Alien Enemies Act was invoked, it was used to detain and deport German, Japanese, Italian immigrants during World War XI.
But in all seriousness, let's break all of this down for a second, because it is wild to me. In May of 2025, Omar filed her financial disclosure, reporting she and her husband were worth between $6 and $30 million. The year before that, under $51,000. The money was tied to two of her husband's companies, a California winery called Est Crew and a venture capital firm called Rose Lake Capital. I mean, good for him. We love an ambitious king out there building his empire. Except that empire that was supposedly worth over $5 million had $650 in the bank. The website was blank. The phone was disconnected. And a journalist showed up to the address and the building manager left a note saying that they hadn't been tenants there in years. One of their wines was called the Devil's Lie. And I'm not making that up. Am I tasting notes of black cherry and fraud with a finish of federal investigation? Her husband's other company claimed to manage $60 billion in assets, and it wasn't even registered with the SEC. Ghost companies on a congresswoman's disclosure valued at tens of millions of dollars. And then quietly on March 26, Omar amended her disclosure. $30 million became $18,000 to $95,000 overnight. The explanation, accountant mistake. 9 days later, the winery dissolved. But what would they do with all of the devil's lies? Asking for Congress. Rose Lake Capital is shutting down too. The evidence is literally filing paperwork to disappear. And through all of this, when a reporter had the nerve to ask her in the halls of Congress, her response was, "I still think you're stupid for asking me anything." The audacity. Her Minnesota district has seen hundreds of millions, if not billions, in fraud. And she is standing in the halls of Congress calling reporters stupid for asking about her shady financials. The same woman calling them stupid thinks that we've had 11 world wars. Let that sink in. So, Elon, the reporter wasn't stupid for asking. Your constituents aren't stupid for wanting answers, and we are not stupid for seeing this for exactly what it is. Nice try, though.
Now, listen, numbers, some things don't lie, but they do change when people get caught looking at them. Because going from millions to oops, accounting error, that's not a typo. That's a complete rewrite. And people are supposed to just sit there like, yeah, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. Imagine telling the IRS, my bad, I accidentally added $30 million. They wouldn't even laugh. They just send that paperwork. And when questions start stacking up like this, some people start getting, let's just say, real quiet.
Omen signals the feds may get involved.
The whole file is being reviewed. A lot of smart people are on it. Stay tuned.
Safety correspondent Mike Tobin has got the details. He's with us in Chicago. Hi, Mike.
And, John, the issue Minnesota Republicans have with her is that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is not facing the questions, not to reporters, not to the Minnesota House Committee on Fraud Prevention. You've got the issue of her family estate. Disclosures show she and her husband, Tim Minette, went from debt to anywhere between $6 and $30 million in 2024. A few weeks ago, a new disclosure was filed stating their combined assets were between $18,000 and $95,000. Her office blamed the discrepancy as much as $29 million on an accountant who failed to subtract the liabilities of Minette's businesses.
So I'm going to go ahead and read this post here, too. Why did Ilhan Omar skip a crucial fraud hearing? Discover the shocking financial discrepancies that have everyone talking. Watch the Davari Dawkins show on OBBM Network TV. Make sure y'all go check it out, man. It's located on Roku, Fire TV app. But yeah, skipping a hearing doing fraud investigations. That's like missing class on test day and still expecting an A. At some point, scheduling conflicts start to sound like, or scheduling conflict rather. It starts to sound like I'd rather just not answer that. You running. We see it. And that, look, people notice. I don't really know what else to add to that because, the same folks who tell you trust the system always seem to disappear when the system starts asking them questions. And just when you think it's contained to one situation, you got to zoom out a little bit.
Well, this is a Fox News alert. It looks like Ilhan Omar isn't the only Millionaire Squad member. Now, our team dug into open secrets and financial disclosure reports. What we found is that when Ayanna Pressley was elected to Congress back in 2018, she had a negative net worth. You fast forward to today, she's worth $1.3 million with assets worth up to $8 million. Now, that's a massive increase in just 6 years, especially for someone on a $174,000 congressional salary. It's impressive, really, But how did she do it? Well, part of its property in 2024, Presley reported owning a Martha's Vineyard rental worth up to $5 million, as well as multiple Boston rentals worth up to $1 million each. Now, for context, back in 2019, she only reported owning one property in Boston. We're also learning days before Presley was sworn into Congress, her husband quit his $92,000 annual Boston City Hall job to start his own consulting firm called Conan Harris and Associates. And as we read more of the Congresswoman's financial disclosure reports, we learn that her husband also saw his income jump while he was in Washington. His client list consists of some government organizations, including one with deep ties to the Obama Foundation. But as he started his firm and seeked new clients, he faced ethics concerns because of Presley's job in Congress. Quote, as Harris's days dwindled in the city's Office of Public Safety, he used his city-issued email account to pitch Walsh's chief of staff on staying on as a consultant. City officials say they did not solicit nor accept the offer, and state ethics laws bar municipal employees from knowingly using official resources for personal gain. Now, we asked Presley for comment, and we even invited her on. She did not answer. But Fox Business anchor David Asman joins me now. He's been looking over this information. And David, there's nothing wrong with gaining financial resources. We see this a lot in Congress, but there are questions.
Well, and you go back to the 1930s, the last when movies began. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I mean, it's happened for a long time. It happens in both the right and left. But what's so rich is that this is coming from anti-capitalist squad members.
Yes.
People who spent their life denigrating our capitalist system and saying how bad it was. In fact, Congresswoman Presley came out with an ex-post just a year ago. She and her fellow squad members, of course, constantly condemn capitalism. But she says Donald Trump and Musk want big banks and bad actors to run rampant and take people for a ride. They want to pillage the government and make themselves rich. Well, she's the one who's been pillaging the government. Now, again, we're not suggesting she's going in and stealing funds or anything like that. But the fact that she got rich off of her contacts in government, her husband got rich consulting with members of the business community and others, perhaps some people who were taking grants. That's, by the way, we saw that with Lee Zeldin, the EPA commissioner. When he came in, he found out that right before Biden left office in December of 2024, he was spending billions of dollars. A lot of that money was going directly to friends, to acquaintances within the Democratic community that learned how to go in and write grants that would get accepted, making millions and millions of dollars, each one of them. So this has been going on for a while. I should mention that Presley's kind of a poor gal next to her friend Ilhan Omar, because Ilhan Omar is worth up to $30 million right now and she went from basically a flat negative, if not negative point when she came into Congress. She also has a husband who's a consultant. He was working with progressive leftists who, again, have this anti-capitalist creed, which they live and die by. But apparently it's very easy to condemn capitalism when you're making millions of dollars. And of course, we have to mention the grand dam of all this, which is Miss Pelosi, who's worth about $275 million, at least $275 million, with her husband Paul, he's a good investor, but she's come to him, I'm sure, with excellent inside information that we're not allowed to trade on, but members of Congress still do. And there are certain trades that she and her husband made that clearly were based on information she was getting about credit card companies that were going to have a particular advantage at other companies.
Now, this is where it shifts from one scandal to a pattern of behavior. Because when multiple people in the same circles all somehow end up in dramatically different financial situations, people aren't crazy for asking questions. That's not conspiracy, yo. That's common sense. And instead of answering those questions directly, you get deflection, you're going to get some spin, you get don't look over here, which ironically makes people look even harder. So this, here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This isn't really about one person or even one state. It's about what happens when people in charge of the system start acting like they're above the system. Because once that line gets blurred, fraud isn't shocking anymore. It's expected. Accountability isn't standard anymore. It's optional. And truth isn't something you explain. No, it's something you manage. That's why moments like this hit different. Not because it's new, but because for once, it's not being quietly handled behind the scenes, behind closed doors. It's loud. It's public. And finally, people are seeing how the game actually gets played. And now the real question isn't even what happened. I think it's, now that people are watching, what happens next? So, if you made it to the end of this video, that's exactly what I want you to write inside of the comment section. What happens next? Y'all be safe. Go check on somebody today. You can quite literally be saving their life. Peace.